This is our site. It does really nothing. But when you look at a website, what really is a website? A website is content. It's content that you can see, that you can interact with. If you go to something like, if you go to Google and you say something along the lines of Roman mythology, and you can look stuff up, Roman gods, you can just go over here and you can see all the things. It's all content, pictures. It's dynamic and fast, approachable content. That's what websites are, and that's what we have here. But this content is not really doing anything for us, and that's when we want to insert or incorporate, I should say, input fields. Input fields are ways that the user can input information. And there are tons of input fields that we can have. Let's put this on the third one, and let's get this out of here. There are lots of different input fields. The most common basic one, of course, is input type. And pretty much with all input fields, you want to have input type, an opening and a closing bracket. Now, you don't need to tell it to stop at any point. These are predetermined input fields. You don't need to tell it to stop at any stage of putting in the input. Again, it's referring to itself. It's an input type that already has a predetermined format. So we don't need to tell it to stop. It knows when to stop. If we were to say input field text, when we go to third, you'll see we have text, and now we can type in the text box. And this will continue out no matter what you put. It depends on the browser, but an input field is going to look the same. It's going to look uniform. It's going to look like this. An input text field anyway. We can also say input type equals password. And it knows, let's put a break on that one. Again, a line break is just a line break, which is why it doesn't have a closing tag. You don't need to tell it how big the break has to be. It's a line break. But if you look here, this is an input field. This is a password field. So whenever you type in a password, it dots itself out because it is defined as a password field. If we were to break that, since HTML5, I believe, there's also an email field. An email input field is an input field that will give you a bunch of crap if you don't put the @ or anything else. Now that, we're going to get to how we can process this, but I just want to show you a few more. There's also an input type date, which gives you a date picker. So like this, a simple date picker, and you can go all the way back. Whenever you see anything on your cell phones or any kind of online forms that gives you this for your birthday and everything, that's a date field. There is also an input time field, which, in case you're not paying attention, would just be time. And you could put it 01, you could put in whatever. And yes, there is also an input date time field. And an input date time field it should be a, hold on. Let's take a look at the actual, because let's take a look at the actual input fields. So let's go to HTML and we'll go to, there's a list of input fields. I must have done this wrong. Elements, let's just go like this. Okay, input types. So, daytime local. Okay, I forgot to put the local in there. And if you do an input local, you'll see this. And then you could pick a date, you can pick a time, whatever. Again, if you have an input field or if you want people to fill out a form or something and give you the date and time that they did it, you can have that. You could say today, and it would be the day of. If you wanted something that was a radio button, you would say radio. And anyone that doesn't know, radio button is when you have a specific dot. But radio buttons, you have to define them. So you have to say, you have to give it a name. A, and input type equals radio, and give it name B. Or value, I should say value, we gotta give it a value. And we'll go input type radio value equals C. And you'll see these, and you can only pick one at a time. I mean, we're picking 3. Typically, you only pick 1, but the reason is because we've given it values. We haven't actually incorporated it into a specific name. That's when you would need the name to say name equals radio. If you give it all the same name, then it knows it can only be of one value type. And if you go like this, now when you look, it only selects one. There's also a checkbox. When somebody says check here or whatever, if you go on a website and it says check here, that is a checkbox. We can give that a value too, H. And you can put as many of these as you want. HI. Gotta remember my ABCs. J. Now we'll just do 3. Right? And now if you go here, you can check all those. Let me see anything that would be more interesting. Search, reset range. I mean, range is okay. If you're interested, that is more, that's a slider, which has a default value. You can give it a max and a min. And then you need JavaScript to kind of present what values these are. All right, slider like that. You can do color, which is a color picker, if you wanted. And you know, I'm just showing you these things so you get an idea of the simplicity in all these amazing things that you see. See, color picker. You could style this. You can use JavaScript to make it a little bit more advanced. But every one of these input fields, I'm trying to think of what I can come up with off the top of my head. Yeah, it's pretty much all these. This is all I use. Let me see the other ones. Give me a little bit of a. There's file. We're gonna get into file a little later. There's hidden. We're gonna get into hidden a little later. You know, that's more or less like the. Yeah, let's give you file. File is how you download images or files into your website. So you can pick one of those, and then you see the value shows up here. But files are a little bit more intricate. We're going to have to go into those later on. As of now, we're just going to give you the bare bones. But of course, none of this matters if you don't have an input type equals submit value equals click name. Nah, we won't need a name right now. But an input type submit is your submit button. And what this would do is this would process, excuse me, I'm belching. this would process whatever it is that you were putting together here. I mean, you could see there are other ones like month and whatever where you want to just pick a month. You know, stuff like that. I mean, I don't, if I were doing that, I'd pick a whole year, date, whatever. But you got date, time, you have input, regular text, inputs, you have password. This, again, is not going to matter until we do something with it. One little bit of a trick here is, and it's not so much a trick, it's just a format trick. Notice how I've said input fields are predetermined, so you don't have to actually tell it when to stop. Text areas are a different story altogether. Text areas, you do need to tell it when to stop because text areas are areas of text that can be expanded and shrunken, minimized and maximized. So they do need a predetermined, or not a predetermined, but a determined end. Typically you would end them here unless you wanted to start off with a value. But here's the thing. Typically, when you have a text area like this, every time you click in, it doesn't matter where you click in, it starts at the top left. If I were to put a space between it, you can then start it wherever the hell you want within that space. Now, if I were to do something like this, I could start anyway. You see what I'm saying? That's why text areas have closing and ending brackets, because you might want to do something with the text area where you might want to give somebody some space to click wherever they want. If you don't, then no matter where you click, it's going to always end up here. So the text area, opening bracket and closing bracket, more or less tells the HTML where the cursor is going to start, as opposed to these, which are predetermined. They're going to start here. You can't start them anywhere else. Now let's do a hidden. I'm going to show you a hidden one. And we're going to use some of these later on when we start building a site together. But if we go like this, hidden, and we go value, blah, 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 which is not what that would say. That would be more like, but whatever. Let's play along for a second. You won't see anything. It's not here. But if you check on the inspection, you will notice, oh look, my hidden with the value of blah. It's right there. This is important if you ever wanted to do any kind of JavaScript and you wanted to have a value somewhere that it could pick up dynamically. We're not there yet. I'm still trying to figure out how to do all this because I'm not sure if I'm pretty sure we want to do the front end first and then worry about the back end later. And in case you're wondering, the back end is going to be PHP. We're not going to be doing the back end in Python or Ruby. We're doing it in PHP because PHP was made for this. But that is completely irrelevant right now. Don't even listen to what I'm saying. It's me. I can't just stop thinking of what's to come. But these are all your input fields, more or less. These are the majority of your input fields. Again, this is not an input field. This is a text area. That's a big difference. Text areas are not input fields. You can put stuff in it, but it's not an input field. An input field is a determined field that is looking for a specific type of input. Text area, you could put whatever the hell you want in a text area, and there's no predetermined size or whatever, more or less. It's what you make of it. Text area is what you would want to do if you would allow people to respond to, if you had a messaging system, to have their own like blogs so that they can input their own data and stuff like that, and content and whatever. That's what you would do with a text area. Input, you could do that with input fields, text, input, text, and you wouldn't want to do it in password because you couldn't see anything, and you wouldn't want to do it with these. But there has to be something here. And what are we at in terms of time? Okay, whatever. I mean, again, it's not difficult stuff. It's just, okay, let's expand on this a little bit. Anyway, There are things you can do with text areas. There are things you can do with text types or input fields or whatever. And aside from give them names, you want to give them values because the values, well, you don't want to give them values. You want to give them names. If we're going to process something, like some kind of input, we want to give this a name, like, text, password. You want to name it to make it a little bit more relatable. Let's go username. I am going to take this out. I am going to let me take out the color and the range. And let's take out the month. Let's take out the hidden. Let's put this down here. Do I want to take out the file? Let's keep the file for now. Let's keep that. Keep that for now. We'll put the submit button. Now, it doesn't have to be submit. It can say input type equals button. And it would pretty much be the same thing. It just doesn't have any real, and then you'd have to give it like a name and stuff. The only reason why I wouldn't use input type button and I would do submit is because submit tells the HTML what it's there for. You know what I mean? Value. You have to put a value unless you want nothing in there. Like that. And just to also let you know, there are buttons in HTML, and buttons have opening and closing tags. And you could put, click. You could put stuff in there. So you don't. I'll put it to you like this: if you were to do a submit is good if you're doing refresh processing. Buttons are good if you're doing JavaScript asynchronous processing. Now, we're not up to that yet. You could use either one. It really does not matter. But buttons are more like anchor tags. There are things there that you could use to point to and get functions working. Whereas submits, they pretty much do one thing. That's what they're there for. They're there to submit. So we'll do username, password. We'll do email. We'll do name, date, and you gotta name everything. Now these already have values to them, and they already have names to them. If you notice, there's nothing determining which ones. Let's get rid of the checkboxes. We can do that some other time. If you notice, there's nothing telling you what these radio buttons do, and there's nothing telling you what's in here or what they're for. So they're pretty anonymous. But and we'll give this one a name of area. But there is a way to label these things, and they're called labels. And what you want to do is go label for. I typically put the name in there. So enable label for radio. And we'll close that. And we'll say choose one. And then we'll put a BR there. A B Arthur. And if you look, now it has a label or label, if you will. But they don't themselves have values, so we should put labels for each of those. So let's go label for, we'll make this a paragraph. And then we'll put labels for each one. Label for, oh, no, we don't need for paragraph one. That. Label for equals the radio A, and then we'll tell it to stop being a label there. And then we'll go label for B. Tell it to stop being a label there. And then we'll go label for radio. C. Saying label for anything, you could say label for biscuits. It makes no difference. It's just going to put it wherever the hell you tell it. I don't like that space there, but we're going to just roll with it for now. And now you know what each value is. But you can do the labels too for the input fields. You can say label for username if you'd like. Whoa, caps lock there. Or equals username. And close that. And you say username. And if you just do it like that, it's going to be next to it, like this. If you say BR, it'll be above it. But I don't like that myself. And if you don't like that yourself, you can do one of two things. You can give it a value. The only problem with value is it's going to put it literally in the thing. So if you have a password field and you said value, now it's coming up like this. If you did a password, if you did value here, or value here, and you try to do a value here, you're telling it to put an actual value in there. And as you can see, it doesn't work. So the best thing to do is to not use value, unless you really want to put a value in there first, but to use placeholder. Placeholders are predetermined, pre-programmed, or pre-coded keywords that give you that faded look, which you can click into. Now, I don't think it's going to do anything with the date time. We could try it, and it's not going to really do anything with it. But if you say, and you can also do that here in the text area, those placeholders will hold places. So now when you click on them, they're not in at all being touched. They're not being changed. And then when you type, then they go away. So placeholders are my favorite go-to. I just like the way they look better. You can use labels. It's not a big deal. As you can see, the daytime doesn't really matter. But that would be a better choice. So let's get the placeholder. But yeah, so placeholders. Now, if you wanted to put a value into a text area, as I've said, text areas are not really input fields per se. Now, if I were to get rid of the placeholder, and if I wanted to put a value in there, like a choose this, I wouldn't put value in here. Within the parameters, I would just type in there choose here or type here or whatever. And then that would show up here. So if you like you were doing an edit or something and you wanted whatever they originally put in there to show up, then you would use value, because that's an actual value. But if you just want to have some kind of placeholder, it's placeholder. But you'll be saying, wait a minute, how come this is not processing? I hit the center button and nothing's happening. It's not doing anything. Well, that's because we need something else that I'm going to show you in just a minute. I will be right back.